Hey everyone, Scott here with a bonus Wednesday video. I've had more than one person, probably 3 or 4 of you, ask a question along the lines of what denomination am I or what tradition I'm from. And, that pretty much is a frequently asked question for a channel my size. So this is our first miserable offender FAQ, or maybe MoFax? I don't know. But that's what we're talking about in this video. I'm going to try to keep it short. And perhaps you already know part of what the answer is going to be because we have all these United Methodist books sitting on the desk. And the short answer is yes, I am a United Methodist. But it's complicated. So let's go into the long answer. First, let's talk about the uncomplicated part. Then we'll talk about why I say it's complicated. And then I'll address why perhaps you might have heard me mention being an evangelical and why this channel seems to have a very Anglican theme, even though I'm not Anglican. All right, so yes, I am a United Methodist. I've been a member of the United Methodist Church for over 25 years. I joined when I was pretty young, and I'm getting kind of old now, although I'm not old yet. I grew up in the UMC, and it runs through my family through many generations. My mother, her parents, both sets of their parents, and probably several generations before that were all Methodists, and then United Methodists when they joined with another church in the 1960s. And I used to go to church sitting next to my mom, who sat next to her mom, who sat next to her mom. Very seriously United Methodist. And, I probably assumed I just always would be. Even in my early adult years when I was away from the church and wasn't active and did not have a relationship with God, I kept my membership in the UMC just because, it was kind of a family thing. Everyone in the family was a member of the UMC. As I found my way back to church, I did so through the United Methodist Church once again. A good friend of mine who really got me back involved with the church and really showed me what it is to have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ was at the time a United Methodist pastor. So the UMC has been very important to me, and I am still a member. So why do I say it's complicated? Well, I say that because I have not regularly attended a United Methodist church for at least 5 years. I've only been to a few services in the last 5 years. Mostly had been to see my friend preach, who he is no longer in the UMC either. That's a whole nother story. The last time I was in a United Methodist service was my grandmother's funeral last year. She was, of course, as I mentioned, a United Methodist. There's a few reasons for why I'm not involved anymore, and I'm sure some of you know about the many problems and divisions and things going on in the UMC, and it's hard to see. It's really sad to see a denomination that you've been so involved in for so many years and your family was, and it's very kind of tradition for you to be so divisive and messy and just it's unpleasant. Um, but and there's a lot of reasons, and I have different views on things, and I don't want to go into all that because it is a very divisive situation right now. But that's not really the primary reason. The primary reason is about 5 years ago, things were getting very serious with Mrs. TSB, who was then my girlfriend slash fiance around that time. She was not raised in the UMC. She was not raised mainline at all. She was raised Southern Baptist and then later became more or less an Anabaptist. You've probably heard me call her a Mennonite. I use that very broadly because people know what that is by and large. She was really River Brethren, which is has a lot of similarities with Mennonites, but is not quite Mennonite. It's heavily influenced by Anabaptism, but some other traditions as well. That's a whole nother subject. But she had no interest in being in the UMC or really most any mainline tradition. She's very against infant baptism, things like that, which are, of course, not practiced in Baptist or Anabaptist traditions that she was familiar with. And I wasn't. It was fine with me to go to another church if we had settled down in Lancaster, PA, where she was living at the time. I would probably be River Brethren as well right now. But that's the biggest reason. We just started getting involved at other churches. We had to find something that worked for both of us. And in the last few years where we've lived, that has been mostly broadly evangelical small churches. And so that's what I've been involved in. The church that I regularly attend right now, but I'm not a member of, is a broadly evangelical church. Now, I think it's important to note, we have this kind of view these days, at least in the United States, that evangelical and mainline are these two separate things. You're one or the other. And, traditionally, that's not how I see and hear evangelical being used. I know many Methodists, people who are members of the United Methodist Church or similar denominations, such as my friend I mentioned, who's a pastor, who are very evangelical in their beliefs, in the way they approach the Bible, in their absolute belief in a personal relationship with Jesus Christ, so on and so forth. They're very evangelical in how they live out and view their faith, and are very influenced by broadly evangelical teachings, scholars, Bible translations, etc. So this idea that you can't be an evangelical if you're a Methodist, that's not accurate. The way we use evangelical now is so odd. It's become more of a cultural, political sort of label, not so much about theology, it seems. I don't use it for myself. I don't claim to be an evangelical. I've never identified as an evangelical. Growing up, I identified as a Methodist because I went to the United Methodist Church. I knew I was a mainline Christian, but I didn't really know what that meant. I didn't hear people saying evangelical growing up, so it's never been a identity I use, and I don't identify as an evangelical. But broadly, would I say I'm, broadly an American evangelical? Probably. If you look at some of the most basic definitions of what is an evangelical, there's a lot of things I would say yes to. If you get into a more detailed, here's what I say an evangelical means, and then I might start going, well, yes, maybe, no. I don't get too hung up on these things anyways. I'm a Christian. I'm a follower of Christ. I do identify as a Methodist because I grew up in that tradition. It does have an impact on the way I view things, on my faith. I'm broadly Arminian. I broadly agree with a lot of things that I see that people would say defines what a Methodist is. It has an impact. I have, I grew up in a very, I'd say, traditional United Methodist Church. It was still liturgical. We still sang out of the hymnal, services out of the hymnal. It was orderly. It was not just a very contemporary evangelical-ish sort of service like I see in so many UMCs today. So it did have an impact on me, and it is something I remain interested in. Just last year, I read this book, United Methodist Beliefs by William H. Willimon, which helped me to kind of better understand and connect with the faith tradition I grew up in. And I still have some UMC hymnals around, including this really nice one that I found at Mamo's favorite thrift store last year. So yeah, I think that pretty much covers that part. The last thing I think there is to say is, some people may come to this channel and they see it's called Miserable Offender, very prayer book language, and they see I have Thomas Cranmer as my sort of avatar, and they see me talking a lot about the Book of Common Prayer, primarily the 1928. Here's one right here in the box. So, and then they may assume, hey, is this guy an Anglican? Is he Episcopalian or something else? And no, I'm not Anglican. I've never been Anglican. Obviously, the Methodist Church is a close cousin of the Anglican Church. Wesley himself was an Anglican priest, as I believe was his brother Charles too. They both were Anglicans. They both were seeking reform in the Anglican Church, not to start their own church, but that's what happened, as often does. And there was more of a tradition of using some of the Book of Common Prayer in its services in the Methodist Church in earlier years. The baptism service in the 1960s hymnal, this one right here, is, as I understand, pretty much the same one that's in the older prayer books, which would be the service that I was baptized by, because I received infant baptism before the 1989 hymnal came out. So, there is some Anglican roots in the tradition I grew up in. You can see that in things like this I reviewed a few videos back, the Wesley Orders of Common Prayer. But, my take and my opinion on this is the Book of Common Prayer is just a wonderful gift to all Christians, and all Christians can benefit from it. So I do not believe you need to be Anglican or Methodist to benefit from the prayer book tradition. If I was a single man, I'll say this, I do believe at this point in my life, very likely I would be an Anglican of some kind. Where I live, I have a lot of options. We have of course, the Episcopalian Church. We have the ACNA is well represented here. There's even at least one continuing Anglican denomination I know of in the Columbus area that uses the 1928 prayer book. And I would love to check out a service there. I wish they had some more options on times and days other than Sunday morning. But, so yeah, I think with everything I've done and how much I love the prayer book, I feel very drawn towards that tradition and may be part of that. But I am a married man, and as I said, Mrs. TSB, not interested in Methodist Church or most mainline traditions, and she's not real interested in the Anglican tradition, the very liturgical services, and very, that kind of high church setting. It's not for her. And ultimately, what I need is a church that my wife and I can attend together. And, there's been compromise on both our parts with that, as with many things in our marriage, because that's marriage. So I love the Anglican tradition and have a lot of respect and awe for it, same as for the Methodist tradition I grew up in. So at this time, I remain a member of the United Methodist Church because I haven't joined another church, but eventually I will, along with Mrs. TSB, find a church that we feel is the right fit for us and join, and I will give up my UMC membership when we do. Anyways, I hope you found this interesting. I know it wasn't the most exciting video. It's just me talking about myself and tradition I'm in, but for the few of you who've been interested in knowing more about where I come from, I hope this was helpful. And if there's any other questions that you guys have for me, you'd like to see me answer in a future video, I'm not going to promise to answer everything, but, leave your questions in the comments below, and if something seems like I'd be interested in talking about it, maybe I'll do a video. But if you enjoyed this, give me a like, subscribe if you haven't already and like to see more. As always, I thank you for watching. God bless, and we'll see you for the next video. Have a wonderful day, friends.